ITAD in 15. I'm joined today by Frank from FutureDial, Roger from EPS, and Dan, who's an independent expert. And we're changing the topic of today because yesterday's practice session, the three of them went off on a really nice tangent. So we're actually going to continue to explore that tangent. So we're going to be talking about standardization in the data sanitization industry. And I'm going to lead with Frank, actually, if I may. So Frank, standardization as an ITAD or sanitizing media, it's easy, isn't it? It's all the same.
Yeah, I wish. Thanks, Steve. I see a major challenge, especially in my space in mobile, is the lack of standardization across the Android platform. And of course on mobile devices, but, also on wearables, appliances, consumer electronics. So, from an erasure standpoint, but also from a reuse standpoint, it can present, a gap in understanding as to the proper, methodology for testing those types of devices, as well as sanitization, functional evaluation, that kind of stuff. So, more standardization hopefully is on the horizon. I know that Google tried this a few years back with their design of their UI. I'd like to see it a little more with their technology architecture as well. I don't know if Roger, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, from the mobile perspective, not as much, but from a general ITAD perspective, I see that standardization lacks across the board with respect to each asset that's being treated. So you'll have a single objective, erasing, testing, maybe even reimaging, and you've got different interfaces, different vendors, different capabilities, different training required. So you've got one area that might be using one tool because it's cheaper, another area that's using another tool because it's more robust, another area that's using another tool. And so now you've got technicians that need to learn multiple tools. They have to all interface differently to ERP systems or databases. And so there's such a disparity of tools within the same company, within even the same space, that it can create a real, or can wreak havoc when you've got employee turnover, especially. Now you have to retrain somebody on how 3 different procedures go or 3 different processes. And yeah, I mean, I think part of that also adds to the chain of custody question. People aren't even keeping track of their assets because they've got all these different ways of doing things. Sometimes they're using freeware that has no interfacing capability or reporting capability. And it just becomes really sloppy. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, there's certainly with the from an ERP point of view, that would definitely help companies to improve their trackability and tracing. And I think sometimes when a company is quite small, they don't actually invest into ERP or invest into best of class hardware for testing their drives, their hard and their wearables. There's also a technological part of this where some of your operators will not understand how to, where's the where's the serial number of the iWatch, IMEI, where to find that, how do you actually find it, how do you pair it? There's so much tech out there, especially with IoT, that it's like an avalanche of different types of equipment, different interfaces, different software products. There does need to be some kind of cohesive system for actually running all of these bits of hardware which you need to erase and also to track them. And obviously the chain of custody is very important. So some startups, like $0 to $1 million, you never know. They may be paper-based system because they think that's the best way of doing it. But with SaaS products nowadays, and for different types of models available to companies, I think these smaller companies, especially startups, should be looking for kind of an integrated system. SaaS, if it's an ERP, that's going to help a lot. Frank, what do you think to the ERP and how that helps with?
And you bring up a good point, which just made me go down a path of a lot of these smaller companies and the larger ones are more and more trying to get more certified to the standards that are out there, like R2, ISO, RIOS, right? So a lot of these standards are attempting to align folks to be a little more organized and track assets and all this stuff, but there's challenges even there, right? So the standards do a pretty good job, but they're also intentionally a little ambiguous, right? So sometimes you can run into different auditors having different takes on standards, right? And so that presents a whole set of interesting complications and nuances in that whole certification space. And the intentions are right, but I think that left to their own devices, sometimes folks don't really know which way to turn. Roger, that's like right in your wheelhouse, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, Frank, to your point, the one of the big issues with auditing is inconsistency. You'll have some companies that will be using freeware that doesn't support any kind of a purge technique, and they'll be processing SSDs and NVMEs with overwrites, and that flies under the radar of an audit system or of an audit spec, if you will. And then, they won't get called out on it. And then you'll have others that are doing everything exactly right. And somehow an auditor finds a way of, flagging them and giving them a hard time. And there's no standardization there. So it's tough for an ITAD even to standardize when the audit group or the certification body doesn't have a standardization across its platform for them to adhere to.
That's a good point. Can I just say with the auditor, an external auditor, for example, may not have the technical ability to understand exactly the difference between an NVMe or a SAS. So an auditor would just be checking, is that a ruler? Is it 30 centimeters long? They won't be able to understand the technical nuances of the different products. It's something where plug-in ADISA is they do understand some of that technology, well, a lot of it. So it does help when they come in and audit because they know what the equipment is. They'll say, what's that NVMe sitting there? Actually, it's not an NVMe, it's a SAS. There's different types of auditors as well. So maybe a more technical type of auditor would help the industry in the standardization. Work in building construction quite as well.
Yeah, you bring up a good point.
Trained. There's types of auditors as well, so that's something worth looking into anyway.
You bring up a good point because an auditor that is kind of navigating in a mobile space and then visits somebody like Roger or visits somebody that specializes in networking servers, high-end telecom equipment, that's a very different platform for clearing. It's a different platform. There's different expectations around what's functional, what's not. I don't know if Roger, you could speak a little bit to that, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think from that standpoint, whatever the certifying body is, needs to have specific. I mean, it's not overly complicated. A bullet point, network switch. This is what you look for. Mobile phone, this is what you look for. If it's an Android, this is what you look for. If it's an Apple, NVMe, this is what you look for. This is what an NVMe is. Things like that, where, I mean, on one sheet of paper, you can probably cover all the different storage technologies that are being dealt with, what they should be looking for from a testing perspective, cosmetic grading, obviously they've already covered that, and then any kind of erasure that's going to happen and/or reporting. I don't think it needs to be overly complex, and I don't think they need to be geniuses. I think they just need to have the right guidance that shows them this is what you look for. Okay, you're erasing NVMe, so we're looking for a purge technique. Here are the 3 that I have listed on my sheet of paper. Which one are you doing? Show me.
Yeah, it's not for an auditor to actually. Shouldn't really be for an auditor to advise about what they should be doing. They should be just like you're saying there, Roger, just tick off. You've done this. It's down to someone like ADISA who would actually set down these rules, policies, and these are the ones which you should be following, and the auditor should just check that you're actually following that.
Exactly.
So yeah, they don't need to be a genius, but it helps if they understand.
And Dan, to your point earlier on hardware, you mentioned that there's no standardization on proper hardware for testing. There's a lot of people that are spending bad money for the sake of not wanting to spend money to basically use junk in order to test hard drives and erase hard drives, SSDs, NVMEs. And when you use junk to test questionable product to begin with, because ITADs, let's face it, aren't getting brand new stuff that's coming off the line. They're getting used product, could be anywhere from a year to 8-10 years old. And you can't be always questioning whether or not your environment is the cause of your problems and lack of productivity. Frank, what do you think about that?
I think you're right on, and it's, especially for startups or for smaller companies that are very price conscious, right? They're going to try to use and extend the life of things. But to your point, I mean, you can start introducing complications into your process that you don't need to. I mean, we run into that a lot with folks that are using older Wi-Fi setups and that kind of thing, because sometimes our systems will have to bounce off of the Wi-Fi to check different items or that kind of thing. So we do encourage, when we go into an operation, especially if a company is looking to maybe automate some of their processes, to really make sure that they're using quality and not state of the art necessarily, but quality products so that they can support the solutions that we're providing adequately.
There's the ITAD environment is very dusty, and there's an issue with if you are putting in a data center rack, for example, into a dusty environment which isn't really designed for that, that can cause electronic connection issues with the dust, and you will have false positives. You'll have huge failures and you won't know it. Your operators won't understand. So where you are thinking that you're saving money, it's just not true. It will be costing you money because you'll be throwing away good drives, good units, thinking that it's the drive, the hard drive or whatever it is, and not the actual rack or the system. So there's when I cringe when I see old dusty hardware in a setup testing 8 terabyte drives, for example. It's ideally have the test equipment as well in a cleaner area. In a separate area would be ideal with better airflow. But this is a typical thing. People I've seen, I know where some test equipment has been just put underneath a desk and it's just gathered dust, and they're still putting drives in there. So needs to be a respect as well for the technology and the equipment that they're running. Servicing is very important as well. Roger, what do you think?
To your point, we've
servicing
seen
and cleaning.
I've seen test equipment that had was used in the same area as shredding. And of course, the dust that's in the air is metallic. So now you've got metal particulates covering a motherboard of a test system, and that never works out well.
Bit of a hazard.
We have a similar, at a carrier, we have a similar situation where, not a shredder, but you do have to, because our units are dust sensitive, right? To your point, Dan. So when they're doing automation, you do have to have a means of keeping the dust down, and it's funny that it's amazing that you would mention that somebody is shredding right next to.
That's totally believable.
Or even in the same area, like square footage. It's just not good.
Chaps, I said you'd see my ugly face for radio at the end of 15 minutes, and we're bang on 15 minutes there.
Right.
So I'm gonna, and we're just a nice little break there. So I'm gonna say thank you very much. There's a whole bunch of stuff I was making notes while we were talking about standardization, and I think there's a parallel between standardization equals inconsistencies, which equals a degree of either increased risk or increased cost, which is what we're hearing as well. We're also seeing, which is our last point that we read through there, which is a false economy. Saving money somewhere because we're being cheap was not the phrase we used on this session, but we talked about it yesterday, being cheap, which actually ends up costing you more. And whilst it may be down, and this is the entry point, the startup scenario of you having to keep your costs down, but actually the fact the brave startup probably spends in the right areas to get a better product and a better output, which will see you scale quicker. And I think that was really important. And then Frank, repair challenges, standardization, again, because it's a broad subject. We talked about the technology, the ability to repair, and I know that the right to reuse is both in the EU and the US now really getting its legs, and the ability to repair. a lot of that will come with the architecture itself and the design process, and getting some type of standardization into that will help this sector as a whole. So I'm going to say thank you very much. Stay online because we'll have a chat afterwards when we pull the curtain down. But I'm going to say thank you very much, chaps. It wasn't a subject that we slated that we were going to talk about, but standardization as a topic, I think, is really broad, and 15 minutes doesn't do it justice, because you covered an awful lot of ground there. I know that we could drill into each in more detail, and I think that's something that you should consider for the future. So for everybody listening today, it's December 2022. This is the last ITAD in 15 for this year. Please email us with some topics you would like us to cover. This is very much meant to be an industry forum. We can get some really great guys who've got experience, guys and gals, I should say, of course, who've got experience in this area. The idea is that they just chew the cud almost in an informal fashion to see if we can draw out some of that experience. If you've got things we'd like to cover, or even if you'd like to take part as a panelist, please email me, steve.mellings@adisa.global, and we'll see if we can pick you up and put that into the schedule for 2023. So Frank, Roger, Dan, thank you for this. Enjoy the rest of your year until it's what left of it. And if you stay online, we'll have a debrief afterwards. But thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.